Is there any discussion amongst commissioners?
Well, I've repeatedly tried to compromise on this issue. I mean, I've been working on this 4 years. I've said this several times. I'll say it again. I believe there is public sentiment for coastal and river wetlands protection. But when most citizens think of that, they think of development, they think of subdivisions. Most people don't understand this wetlands ordinance applies to a 50 by 100 lot that's been owned since the 50s or the 60s. It affects you. It makes it where you cannot build on it if the right conditions are met. I've been contacted by 3 people at least. I don't build houses anymore, but they want to build on their property. They don't want to destroy the wetlands. They want to build a house on their lot that they've owned for years. They cannot do it because there is no variance procedure to get closer than 35 feet to that wetland buffer, to the wetlands. That's my real problem with this ordinance, is that there's no variance procedure to get closer than 35 feet, no matter what. And it treats an isolated wetland that may be a swamp in your backyard with the same amount of protection as a pristine marsh that's an estuary that I think everybody agrees deserves probably extra protection, and I would support that at some point in the future. But I'm in a box. I got to make a decision. Either repeal it or keep it. And whatever good things there are about the wetlands ordinance, the bad to me far outweighs it. And I've also, my opinion on the let's delay the implementation date has evolved, if you will, because if we repeal it now, which I'm going to support repealing it now, at least the people that are sitting there waiting to do something with their property can go ahead and get a building permit to not destroy wetlands, but to build a house on their lot without destroying any wetlands. Heather, if we pass this, does this mean that tomorrow people can go fill in wetlands? Okay, say that again?
No,
So we got a firm answer from the lawyer on that one.
they cannot go fill in wetlands.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, I'd like to ask.
So let me finish real
okay.
quick and I'll be done. I believe if we put this on the referendum, I believe if the citizens, and I'm going to honor whatever choice the citizens make. If the citizens decide that they want to impose buffer zones and a 5-0 vote requirement to change the buffer zones and deny people use of their property, the citizens of Wakulla County should be willing to compensate those people for that. That's the citizens' decision, and that's my position. That's what it's evolved to. You know, I tried to compromise on this issue several times. Neither side wanted to compromise. I was demonized. Even when I said, let's just have it inside the 35-foot buffer zone, I was treated like I wanted to go take a shovel and fill in Wakulla Springs. But anyway, that's all I got to say.
And Commissioner Castro, you wanted to comment?
Yes. In the state of Florida,
I'm gonna.
what's the question, Mr. Chairman?
He was wanting to know if it would be your time, but during this discussion, we can
Time?
speak we can
I have a
speak
set
numerous
amount of
times.
time now?
No, sir, you don't.
Oh.
We can speak numerous times during this issue.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mr.
go
Chairman.
ahead.
Appreciate that. In the state of Florida, can wetlands be filled in legally?
Yes, with a
State
permit.
rules, I mean, you can,
Yes, with a permit. Yes.
yes,
So if the proper permit is obtained, wetlands can be filled in and developed upon.
We voted to let the power company fill some in a couple weeks ago, Howard.
I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that. So when people are making statements that you can't build in the wetlands, that's not right. You can build in the wetlands, okay? You can build in the wetlands. Every year, Florida loses wetlands legally, permitted legally. You know, we all talk about big government. We don't like big government messing with us. Here's local government, okay? Here's citizens with an initiative that's saying, we want to do this. We want these wetlands protected. People are making statements. You can't build in the wetlands. Not true. We heard people at one of the forums where worked for a Department of Protection, Environmental Protection. He says, we're a permitting agency. And as far as buffers, if we don't understand the importance of those buffers, it doesn't have to be a huge wetland. it's a red, it's a web. It's all interconnected. I mean, you all live here in this county longer than I have. I grew up in a marshland in the South Shore of Florida. Basically the same. The birds don't distinguish a private piece of property from a public piece of property. And the whole environmental system works on having a healthy wetland and having healthy buffers. So, I've heard the discussion. I was going to attempt to make a friendly amendment to have the effective date after the citizens have the opportunity to vote on that.
Which I did last time we voted on this, by the way.
I understand. But what I'm hearing is, and I'll try it again then, but I don't think it's going anywhere. But if the rush and whatever's producing this rush to have this vote take place, and I understand it's to give people an opportunity to build on lots that maybe they can't build on. But we hadn't had that many situations where people have been denied.
Because you can't even ask for the variance, Howard. That's why they haven't been denied, because they can't even ask permission. And back to the wetland filling, can you go out and arbitrarily fill a wetland then, if you just want to?
Not legally, you'd have to. get
Well, I mean, but we
You're
have,
trying to scare people,
Oh,
Howard,
no.
saying that
I'm
you're
saying,
gonna start building on wetlands. No, you can't, the state doesn't allow you to just go fill in a wetland. for
no,
the
you
heck
get
of
a permit, you fill out the proper paperwork, you get a permit, and you
With
do it. If you're
justification.
local, that's right. And you heard people say, if you were at that forum at the library, you heard a person with, I think it was 30 years' experience. He says, we're a permitting agency. Fill out the proper paper and fill it out correctly, you're going to get the permit to fill in the wetlands.
Do you believe Shell Point could be built today under the current regulations, state and federal regulations?
Yes, I believe that. You know why? Because I saw it done during the time I'm living here in Wakulla County. I saw a huge wetland filled in outside of Miami. Okay? Couldn't believe it was happening. All legal. Yes. And if the people here want to protect their wetlands, they have to do it themselves. They cannot rely on the state. I'm finished.
Okay, I'm gonna let Jerry speak.
I just had a
Mr.
response
Morton.
to his comment.
Okay,
that,
I think okay, go ahead, Commissioner.
Just for you, Commissioner Kessler, when you voted yes to allow the power company to fill in wetlands and allow the power company to build in the wetlands, were you voting for them to have a negative impact to the wetlands?
You know, Mr. Thomas, there are times when wetlands are going to be filled in. I am not anti-filling in all wetlands, but our state has a dismal record of protecting our wetlands, of protecting our springs. Look around as what has happened to Florida's environment during this last 30 years. Our state has not protected us, and that's the answer. If we want protection, we have to provide it ourselves.
So in this example that was brought up, and I'm asking questions about now, we voted 5-0. We all agreed to allow the power company to move forward with that decision. They filled in wetlands. They built equipment in the wetlands, and we all agreed to it. That came as a result of an application for a state permit. Through that process, the applicant had to properly mitigate the wetlands. For those at home that may not use the word mitigation all the time, that means that they had to create a positive that outweighed the negative that they were creating. So when they brought that to us, they had already been approved by the state. The mitigation plan had already been worked out to the point that we as a board, 5-0, felt comfortable with them doing that. And even you could have still voted no at that meeting, but even you understood that they were causing a positive more so than a negative. Yes, they filled in some wetlands, but they had to mitigate in order to do that. That entire procedure was worked out at the state level to the point that we were comfortable with it, and the staff recommendation was comfortable with it. So there are certainly examples where wetlands can be filled in. No one has the ability to just arbitrarily say, I prefer to build in the wetlands when they have enough uplands they could build on. But if they do cause a negative impact, they have to mitigate it to offset that impact. And so, we need to make sure the people at home know that we are not eliminating wetlands protection. We're eliminating an additional layer of government. The wetlands will still continue to be protected.
We are going to mitigate our wetlands in Wakulla County out of Wakulla County, because Wakulla County doesn't have large mitigation banks where we can say, we're going to fill in 20 acres here or whatever it is, and permitted legally by the state, and then turn around and preserve something in Wakulla County. Ain't going to happen. We don't have that. So what's going to happen is, in Jefferson County, there's going to be a mitigation for Wakulla County, and Jefferson County is going to have X number of acres, or whatever the ratio is, that are going to be protected because Wakulla County just filled in wetlands. We don't have the same situation as other places that have mitigation banks in their thing. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about 10s and 20s and more of acreage, 100+ acres, being impacted by proper permits that the state allows. I'm talking about state allowing permitting that does damage to valuable resources. They have a track record of allowing that to happen. And I'm saying for myself and for the citizens of Wakulla County, the only way we're going to be sure of protecting our natural resources here in our county is if we step up to the plate, which we did, and now you want to dismantle it.
Nice try on trying to paint the picture that this is going to be shifted to Jefferson County. We just received a legislative appropriation, and we're in the process of purchasing land at Shell Point that will be used. County Administrator, how much land will be purchased as a result of that, that's in the wetlands, that will be set aside as conservation easement and be available for wetlands credits?
Roughly about 48 acres.
And that land is being purchased from state money that we received and is not a burden on the taxpayers, but that land will be available to mitigate those if we need them.
Howard, it sounds to me like if the county were to adopt the state standard, say whatever the state rule is our rule too, then we'd have local wetlands protection. Is that correct?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I don't think if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm saying the state has a dismal record of protecting wetlands. Over the last 30 years plus, our state has failed us.
Okay, what I'm saying
and
is
I'm saying that with the state failing us, how could I possibly say, yes, the state, I'm going to copy what the state has, and I'm going to say, whatever the state has, we're not going to do any more. That's obscene, because we're allowing our environment to disappear and be harmed in front of our noses.
That's not what I was saying. What I was saying is if we adopted their standard, if they didn't do anything about it, then we could. Wouldn't that resolve your whole issue then? Or is the issue really the buffers?
The buffers are hugely important.
Okay. So a buffer around a swamp on the north side of Crawford is the same importance as a buffer around
I'm
a
not
swamp.
saying you know that.
But okay, I'm glad you agree with me. The
They're
ordinance
not-
does not differentiate that.
Understand, but
Okay.
it's better than nothing.
I
Okay,
think
it's
it's
better, well, you think it's worse.
We'll agree to disagree.
And that's
on
why it was called a model ordinance.
Right now, today, if we look at the land that has yet to be developed, that is buildable, can be built upon, it equals about less than 2.5% of the area land mass in our county. 2.5% is available for construction. Now, in that 2.5%, a lot of that land is in wetlands, and you're not going to just be able to arbitrarily build in the wetlands. So if we subtract that wetlands area out, we're talking about 1 to 1.5% of the area land mass in this county. We have a unique, wonderful place that we live in that has in excess of 65% of our county protected by state and federal ownership and is never going to be built on. I like to hear these examples about Tampa and South Florida. We're not those places. We have protections in place that will never allow us to be like them. This 1 to 1.5% that is available, that's a very, very small impact to the ecosystem.
Did you include the new FEMA regulations in that?
No, that doesn't even take.
Actually, with the new FEMA regulations, there will be no developer who will develop a subdivision, in my opinion, because you're going to have to build it up off the ground, and you can't develop and build up off the ground. Individuals can build up the ground because they have the money maybe to do that. But as a developer, you're just not going to be able to develop a subdivision and all the homes 20 feet off the ground. They can be from 3 feet to 20 feet. But the FEMA regulations are going to they're going to reduce from Ralph's 1.5%. We're going to be a county of nothing but the wealthy, because only the wealthy can afford to build in that capacity. Basically, if you look at the coast, there's probably not 100 lots on the coast that you can build on today. And if you look at the marsh on the coast, most of those lots they could be a mile from the Gulf itself. They're close to the marsh, but they're a mile from the Gulf. Of course, the marsh is the nursery for the Gulf and so forth. But if I understood Howard correctly, you would probably rather have Shell Point just go away. Is that correct?
What are you saying, Commissioner Moore? I mean,
Well, you mentioned that Shell Point wasn't. We say that it's probably built in a marsh. It was probably built on a wetland. It has canals and all of that. So under today's conditions, it would be very difficult for anyone in Shell Point to build. Basically, what we're talking about is the perception of what people may do. It's not what they have done behind us. A few people may have done some things they shouldn't. A very, very, very few people. But what we're talking about is the perception, and we're trying to say that 100% of the people going forward are going to damage the wetlands, or they're going to build within 25 feet of the wetlands. So it's nothing more than a perception of the damage. There's no actual damage that you can say that will happen. It's nothing. It's just the perception of what may happen. And I just don't. I'm going to vote to repeal it myself.
Well, I'm going to also be voting to repeal it, and it was a year ago. I was actually the commissioner that made the motion to completely repeal it. I believe that citizens should have full use of their property. Many of these citizens have mortgages on this property. They're paying taxes on every acre of it, and they should have full use of it. And there's been several cases presented to where the present ordinance makes it to where citizens who purchased these small lots with the intention of building a home, they are not able to build the home, are not able to fulfill that purchase. Our ordinance has made some of these lots completely not buildable, even though they bought them with the intention to build, but they're still paying taxes on every foot of it. Many of these are paying mortgages on them. Many of these, there's some lots that was presented to us to where some citizens even cashed out their retirement in order to buy that property to build their dream home, and they're not able to do that, and they're not able to get back the money that they spent. This issue throughout all this has been trying to say it's about the wetlands, but really it boils down to 75 feet of the dry land that borders it. It's dry land that citizens should be allowed to use, and I think the state has adequate enforcement in place in order to do it. The majority of other counties defer back to the state. Since the wetlands ordinance has been enacted, the state has strengthened their standards to where now it mimics a lot of what our ordinance was. Whenever an ordinance was initially enacted, the state that didn't govern isolated wetlands, but now the state does. So, as it was said earlier, our wetlands ordinance is just another layer of government on top of it. But also, when it comes to lawsuits, the fact that we have our own wetlands ordinance, we're first in line if someone decides they want to sue. But if we repeal this wetlands ordinance tonight, which is what I'm going to be voting to do, if we repeal this wetlands ordinance tonight, we're still going to have wetlands protection according to the state standard. And then if someone wants to sue according to those, then they're suing the state and not Wakulla County. So I think this, to me, it is a liability issue, and I will be voting here shortly to repeal this, so the citizens who have been waiting for so long to use the property that they bought and purchased intended to use, that they would be able to hopefully pursue their dream. And I believe they can do that, and our wetlands will still be protected. Do we have any more discussion amongst commissioners before we vote? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor for repealing?
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, motion, the wetlands ordinance is repealed with a 4-to-1 vote.